Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series, the podcast that celebrates individuals, families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Tony Jones is our guest today. Tony contributes to several outdoor periodicals. He's written a dozen books, hosts the Reverend Hunter podcast. He teaches at Fuller Theological Seminary and the Loft Literary Center. He also writes a weekly newsletter on Substack, and his newest book, The God of Wild Places, will be published this April. Tony, it's a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Fantastic. And I appreciate you reminding me that we met in Casper, Wyoming, a couple of years ago for the OWAA's conference. And as like you and I shared, sometimes it's hard to remember everybody we met. And hopefully, we toasted, had a great conversation with each other. And but it's good to have you here on the podcast.
A blur. I don't know. Were you in Vermont as well? I was in Vermont the year before.
I was in Vermont as well. That was
we probably met there too.
Could have met there too. All I remember is that hill was a killer getting from the hotel up to the banquet facility. It's like, I think I needed to bring like a metal shovel just in case somebody might needed to have buried me. Well, you got to Casper, and you're also friends with David McElvaney as well.
Well, he and I met in Casper, and we really hit it off, and we've stayed in touch. I just spoke to him on the phone a couple days ago. Yeah, what a great fellow.
Oh, and I think was he down still in Mexico fishing for tarpon and building a house?
Yeah, was in the Yucatan, and I'm trying to convince him to come to Minnesota for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers National Rendezvous, which is middle of April, and then I've tried to lure him with some turkey hunting.
Okay.
And Hal Herring, actually, who was in Casper as well, from the BHA podcast. I'm trying to dangle a carrot of turkey hunting to these guys to show up in Minnesota in April.
Oh, April, is it still, it's still cold up in Minnesota in April.
Howard, man, we didn't even have a winter. I mean, actually, winter's about to hit right now. It's going to snow 3 times in the next week, but I haven't.
Really?
I actually have not started my snowblower this year.
Oh, wow. I mean, we're having like rain like crazy here in Las Vegas, and I think you may have a hard time getting David up there. I don't think he does cold weather anymore, personally.
That could be. I mean, the stuff he posts on Instagram looks pretty balmy.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now, Hal, I think we've had a conversation, and I know his participation with the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers podcast. So I think you'll more likely to get there. And I would like to invite myself, but I have to say I'm probably not in good shape for this, and I've never hunted in my life, so I think I would be holding you back. But
well, there'll be a lot of in addition to turkey hunting, there's a lot of sitting around the fire with beer too. So that's
the important part, because I would imagine, like angling or fishing, that around the campfire, around the table with some good adult beverages, there's probably a lot of great stories that are being told, which I think that's where beverage really is a great teller of truth, so to speak.
It tends to loosen the tongue, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it does. So tell us a little bit about your background, because I had shared about the seminary, the literary center, the writers. You've got a very eclectic background. So give us a little taste before we kind of dive into the book, The God of Wild Places.
Sure. Well, like a lot of us who are outdoors writers, I pieced together a bunch of different side hustles to try to make one living, which, as you probably have this, and we probably have this in common. It means we have a lot of freedom and not a lot of money. But I'll take freedom over money any day, frankly. Yeah, I mean, I grew up here in Minnesota. I live just a couple blocks from where I was raised, and had a great childhood in a suburb of Minneapolis, and then went to college, and then went immediately to seminary because I just felt from an early age, from about 7th grade, that I was gonna be a clergy person.
Mm.
So I followed that path, and then I did ministry for about 10 years, and then I went to get a PhD in theology, and I was gonna kind of I don't know exactly if I was gonna go back into ministry or go into teaching or whatever, but it was around that time that, um and this is what the book's really about, is my life really fell apart. So we can get into that when we talk about the book, but yeah, I had a pretty successful career as a pastor and an author. It's funny you said, yeah, I've written a dozen books before this one, but they were all in a very different genre. They were all really about theology, the church, prayer, and the kind of stuff I was into. And the tagline of this book is a pastor walks out of the church and into the woods
Mm.
in pursuit of the God he's lost. So, yeah, this is a very different kind of book for me than my past books.
Okay. I would imagine up to some certain point in time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you were very happy about what you were doing, getting fulfillment out of that, because you don't
Yeah,
go.
for sure. I mean, I was having a lot of success, and to be totally frank, it was filling a lot of my ego needs to be
Mm.
up on stages in front of hundreds and thousands of people, to be courted by book publishers, to be getting book contracts, to be quoted in the New York Times. Yes, the the rub was that my personal life was not going swimmingly.
Mm.
I was in a really, really unhealthy, toxic marriage that was killing me physically and spiritually. Um, and I needed to get out. And I knew that if I got out, it was going to be ugly because the marriage was ugly. So
Mm.
often getting out of a tough marriage is even tougher. And then I also knew that I suspected that the church, which is so good at one of the aphorisms people use for the church is it's a hospital for sinners, right?
Mm.
But the church tends not to be so good at being a hospital for broken pastors.
Mm.
So parishioners, that's one thing, but a kind of a semi-celebrity pastor who goes through uh, personal struggles, a lot of the church just did not know what to do with me. And I found myself drawn more and more to the outdoors. And that's really what the book's about, is my journey out of the church and into outdoors pursuits.
Okay. Leaving the side of the theology aside and getting diving more into the outdoor pursuit that is ch chatted about in the book or introduced in the book. Had you all I mean, you're in Minnesota, I think you were born and raised with a fishing rod and a rifle in your hand.
Yeah, you would think that, but I wasn't. My family did. My grandparents had a lake place in central Minnesota, in a very popular area to have lake cabins
Mhm.
around Brainerd, Minnesota.
You s
Um,
Brainerd?
Brainerd, yeah,
My
Brainerd.
Oh my god, we're gonna have to play geography later because I have a very good friend or couple, the wife, Renee, who has her own PhD. They live in Canada, but she was from Brainerd.
No kidding.
Oh my god. This
Well, we
well, we're gonna play geography after this call is
okay,
over.
we have a lake cabin that my grandpa bought some land and built a little cabin
Okay,
on a lake in 1964 that's
okay,
18 miles east of Brainerd.
okay.
And so I grew up going there 3 or 4 times a summer, and we fished for sunnies and crappies,
Mhm.
but nobody in the family was really into fishing and nobody hunted. It was
Mhm.
my dad didn't hunt, neither of my grandfathers hunted. Um, so I was outdoorsy in a sense. I mean, we did a little car camping and we went to a lake cabin where there was a dishwasher and a washer and dryer. So it
Okay.
wasn't super rustic. I went
Right.
to the Boundary Waters once in my church youth group,
Okay.
but I didn't grow up super outdoorsy. I think I kind of liked the outdoors, but it wasn't, no, it was not like we had no guns in the house growing up.
Mhm.
It wasn't a thing that my dad did by any means.
Okay. As you started this new journey into the woods, how did you discover it as a possible destination for your healing
Yeah. Well,
without giving
one
away the book?
yeah, yeah. Well, this story is early in the book and it kind of sets up the journey. Um I was the youth pastor at a big church, a big suburban church, and we had, like a lot of churches do, we had a youth committee. So it was a bunch of parents and me, and we met monthly and planned out all the youth ministry activities. And I don't know, something. Frankly, Howard, I was an angry young man. So I was maybe
Mhm.
28 or 29 or 30,
Mhm.
and I blew up in some meeting. I blew
Mhm.
up. I blew my top. And there was a guy on the committee, a dad who's 15 years older than me, Doug, big guy, 6'6", 280, old football player, rugby player, larger than life kind of character. And he took me out to breakfast after that, and he talked about his own issues with rage. And then he invited me to go duck hunting with him. And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to do that. I'd like to try that." This was before I had kids, and I could just get away. Um And what was interesting was I guess I didn't really know what I was getting into. You'd think, "Oh, let's go duck hunting in Minnesota." We'll, like, go to some public access and push a canoe in and go in some cattails and shoot some ducks. No, we drove to Baudette, Minnesota. We got in a 27-foot sport craft. We drove 2 hours north into Canada in Lake of the Woods, and then we got in a duck boat, and we went another 2 hours north of that. We were out of reach, and this is, like, pre-cell phones, out
Mhm.
of reach. And what I found in that immersion into the deepest wilderness in Canada was that I loved it.
Mm.
I loved it. And what I loved was, well, it's taken me a long time, frankly, and this is why I wrote the book, to kind of come to terms with what I loved about it so much. Um, and I really loved everything about it, but I loved a big part of it is I love the peace. And that's
Mhm.
I write about this in a chapter in the book called Peace. I really like the peace because I was missing peace in my own life. My
Mhm.
my home life had no peace. My home life was nothing but strife. And then obviously that was coming out at work too because I was blowing up at meetings. And I got up there and removed from all of that drama, I felt a great deal of peace. The peace, now looking back, the peace that I was supposed to be getting in the church or in my religion, it wasn't coming there. It came in the outdoors. So that was the beginning, but it really wasn't for another 10 years. I had a taste of it then, but it
Mhm.
was 10 years later when everything fell apart in my personal life that I was like, I have to get back outside. I have to get hunting, fishing. I have to go back to the Boundary Waters and sit in a canoe. And yeah, so it kind of just lived inside me, I think, for that decade, waiting for the opportunity to blossom. Yeah.
Very interesting. I totally appreciate this idea of being separated from external, you know, external stuff,
Mhm.
the internet, the cell phone, somebody texting you, and just being there's nothing else around but just the quiet. And I think the body starts to heal itself. We appreciate the sounds, the smells. Here in Vegas, I mean, the land of everything Vegas is, but outside of Vegas are these beautiful uh, destinations where you just sit out underneath the stars
Mm,
and
yeah,
just
yeah,
watch the stars all of a sudden start to pop. Oh, there's the Milky Way, there's the Orion's Belt, and
yeah.
and there's something very healing about that. And as you began to experience it, did it grow and grow in you that all of a sudden there's significant event 8, 10, 12 years later took you into a whole new direction? Or was there another like aha moment, like I just have to have this in my life?
There were a couple of those light bulb moments or epiphany moments, to put it in more theological terms. I was kind of down on my luck and I knew I wanted to try hunting. I didn't Hunting is a funny thing because it's pretty intimidating if you didn't grow up hunting, nobody taught you how to do it. You don't know people who own land. So I actually posted on my blog that I would preach for free in exchange for hunting. And I got an email a week later from the Episcopal priest in Huron, South Dakota.
Mhm.
And I didn't know anything about Huron, South Dakota, except it has a statue of the world's largest pheasant.
Okay.
So I thought, well, that's a good omen. And I went out, I preached at Jean's church. And met her and preached at her church. And then she introduced me to a fellow. This is 15 years ago now. She introduced me to a fellow at her church, Jorge Vicuña, who was a land manager and who has become one of my dearest friends. And he took me, just the two of us. He took me out hunting. And he taught me everything I know about pheasant hunting, frankly. And he invited me back. And like I said, we became friends and I became addicted to pheasant hunting. I loved walking through fields. I loved working with my dog. I loved the explosion of the pheasant blowing up from being roasted by my dog, being flushed. I loved the taste of the pheasant meat. I loved the cold, the wind, everything about it I loved. Um, and then a similar invitation came from North Dakota. Come and preach at this little church. I mean, Howard, these churches have less than 15 members. Okay. This is why they can't afford to pay for a guest preacher, but they can take the guest preacher hunting. So then I went up to North Dakota and I duck hunted in pothole country and some of the best duck hunting in the country. And that was incredible for this little congregationalist church. And I've done other gigs, similar gigs, and that kind of offer still stands, and I'll still preach in exchange for hunting. And now I just wear my hunting gear right into church, and I preach in a blaze orange vest, and I say, "Sorry, I'm not going to stick around for coffee hour because I got to get out and hunt. I'm here to hunt."
I
uh,
love that. I love that.
yeah, so that opened some doors for me, and once I had some success finding friends to hunt with and places to hunt, I just said, I'm gonna it, whereas my life had been organized around religion,
Mhm.
you know, the way that as a pastor your life is organized around Christmas and Easter and Lent and Advent and these now my life is structured around pheasant opener and deer hunting season and turkey hunting like that. A theme that runs through the book is vestments, which is the term for clergy, the clothing clergy wear, the robes and the alb and the stole and things like that,
Mhm.
and how I've replaced my vestments, my church vestments with hunting vestments, my paddle,
Mhm.
my canoe paddle for the boundary waters, my hunting vest, my
Mhm.
chaps, my boots. These are now my vestments that I wear, and they're the most sacred thing I do, which is go outdoors.
Is there a preference, not a preference, that's the wrong word. It seems to me there's 3 elements to what you're describing. One is finding someone who is like a mentor, a coach for you. So that's the gentleman that taught you about pheasant hunting.
That's right.
There is the part about being outdoors, just in nature and not having these distractions and just kind of embracing the moment, taking a deep breath and just breathing in clean, crisp air, hopefully,
Mhm,
unless you're in a
mhm.
cow pasture. Uh, then there is the act of the hunt, rousting, and I do want to talk about your dog because I want a dog and I don't have one. So I'm
Oh,
envious of you, by the
yeah.
way. So you've got the act of the hunting, and then you have the act of learning about the hunt, and you also as you just shared, the vestment. So you've replaced the garments with the vest, the
Mhm.
chaps, the guns, etc. Does all of that have equal weight for you, or is it just it's part of the recipe for what just makes you whole today?
That's a good question. I don't know that I could necessarily put percentages on it, but, um, I mean, I just think, I guess if somebody were to read the book, obviously a big part of it is the people who mentored me and the
Mhm,
people who took a chance on me,
mhm,
and I think we need more of that, frankly, hunting is in decline
mhm,
in the US, and, I mentor young hunters every year. I know a lot of other people do. A lot of us are very committed to mentoring hunters,
mhm,
but that's a big challenge, and it's super, super important. And look, it's not unlike religion. I mean, religious systems try to do that too. You call it somebody disciples somebody else. That's the religious version of mentoring. Um, Being outside for sure, working with the dog, absolutely. I mean, it's frankly one of the reasons that I like duck and grouse and pheasant hunting a bit more than I do deer hunting or turkey hunting, because when I go out deer and turkey hunting, I gotta leave my dog in the truck, and, I'd rather be with him than without
sure,
him. But also, there's another big part of it for me that I explore in the book. Couple other things I'd say that are explored in the book, and one is, acquiring the meat I eat is really, really important to me, very significant, and it has become a very sacred act, the act of butchering meat,
mhm,
and something that I take very seriously. And then the last one is the penultimate chapter in the book is about death,
mhm,
and I really think that the outdoors has taught me about death, as has put me in touch with death in ways that my previous life had not. And I don't know that there's a more important kind of existential truth for each of us to come to terms with than our own death. So yeah, that I'm frankly I'm out there killing things,
right.
and I make no bones about that. Yeah.
When you're killing things though outside in a hunt, it's in some ways a circle of life is you're consuming it, but it's not like you just. I mean, I the idea of going to Africa or even let's just use Africa, going there finding one of the top fives in Africa and killing something for sport and plastering it on on a wall somewhere. To me, I abhor that idea. I think that's the right word. Whereas the hunting the pheasant, the grouse, etc., you're consuming it, but that's sustenance that's keeping you alive. And
Yeah, that's right, and there's another part of it too that I think it ties me to my ancestors, which I'm more and more interested in, because I just feel like you've already mentioned technology. I just think we're so distant and removed from the people who preceded us and basically got us here. Like, we're here living lives of extraordinary luxury. Like, we're the safest, wealthiest, most well-fed people who've ever walked on this planet.
Mhm,
And we are that way because our ancestors evolved, and they evolved in large part because they were great hunters.
mhm.
And then they figured out how to cook their meat, which killed a lot of the things that were bad for them in the meat. So I think the act of I just am less and less interested in outsourcing the preparation of my meat
Mhm.
to somebody I've never met in a factory who's
Right.
chopping up a pig I never saw and wrapping it in saran wrap and shipping it to the grocery store where I buy it bloodless. Like, I'm more and more interested in being in touch with that meat that sustains me, as you say, and also I think ties me to all the Homo sapiens who preceded me.
So it's tying you to history of man and also to the land as well, because the land provided what we needed. And that's what I love about Native American culture. You, for the most part, unless I'm maybe incorrect, but my perception is you took what you needed. You didn't take and hoard.
Yeah, and
We're
not only that, of course, Native Americans and a lot of Aboriginal peoples w are very well known for using every single part of the animal that they've killed,
Mhm.
and I really work to do the same thing. I use every bit to the point where I'm boiling pheasant feet to try to, like, get some collagen off of them and
All
stuff
right.
like that. I mean, yeah, maybe a little bit overboard, but, yeah, that's super important to me, and I take it very seriously.
Okay. As far as the book, The God of Wild Places is concerned, how is it structured, and what is the journey you're going to be taking your readers on?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a memoir, I guess, but it's a thematic memoir. So it's not necessarily a memoir that says this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It's not particularly chronological. It's generally chronological. But each chapter is around a theme, and then I tell stories around that theme, but I also bring in um resources from philosophy, from various world religions and stuff like that. So there's a chapter about dogs called Companions. There's a chapter about butchering called Meat. There's a chapter about my failure called Failure because I think hunting is one of these things that it's funny, we've mitigated failure and risk out of a lot of modern life, and we've become soft as a result. And I think by hunting pushes us back into risk, and anybody who hunts is well acquainted with failure. It took me 10 years of hunting to shoot a turkey. And I mean, their brains, they've got a brain about the size of a raisin,
Mhm.
and they were they were outsmarting me for a decade. So that's what a reader would expect, kind of thematic reflections that are generally moving through my life.
Okay. As I visited your website, you had a number of reviews, so individuals or photo was there, some quotes. Share more if you can about their journeys, because we don't oftentimes open up for everybody to see, this is what I got out of this book. This was,
Mm.
I mean, there was a couple like, this is the most important book I've read in the last decade. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's pretty strong from folks that are, reading the book, giving you a
Yeah.
review. This is not like I can go to a course and become an Amazon best-selling author in a weekend. Okay. I've done it before. Okay. I wrote my book. I'm done. Podcasting's a whole other game for
Yeah.
me, which I love. But these folks opened up on about your book, and how does that feel to kind of hear the impact that your journey, your words have had?
I mean, there's nothing like it. Frankly, there's nothing like it. Um, to It's one thing to preach a good sermon and then stand in the narthex and shake hands with all the little old ladies and they, "Oh, thank you. That very good sermon today, pastor." Or somebody might even say, "That's the best sermon we've had all year." It's something else to spend 10 years writing a memoir and then put it out into the world and have people you love and respect, like Barbara Brown Taylor, a New York Times best-selling author and award-winning memoirist, or Jim Shockey, one of the most famous hunters in the world who's got his own TV shows. For them to say, "This book stopped me in my tracks," yeah, it's just incredible. I can't thank them enough. As you know, for those of us who create stuff in this freelance gig economy world, podcasts, books, articles, whatever it may be. We put our stuff out in the world, man, and you don't know. You think it's good or good enough, but you've looked at it so many times. You just don't know till it goes out into the universe and has a life of its own what people are going to think of it. I got a text today from a guy who's married to my cousin-in-law. He's married to my cousin. And he's an atheist, and he basically wrote me saying, "I didn't think I would like your book, but Elizabeth told me to read it, so I did," and then went on to write just this beautiful text message about how much he loved the book, how it made him cry twice and laugh out loud once, and he said I can't wait for your next book. I mean, it really stuff like that. I mean, it's just incredible. I'm grateful, I'm blessed. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't know what word is quite right, but it's amazing.
How do you go farther after you've written a book like this? It seems like this is
I'm
your memoir. It's like, gotta wait another 10, 15 years for this?
I mean, yeah, this is the keys when he wrote me that. I can't wait for your next book. I'm like, I don't know what else. I feel like I wrang the washcloth dry. You know what I mean? Like there isn't a drop of water. I'd like or I like another way to say it is I like bled on the page. I pulled my heart out of my chest and like put it out there for the world to see. So
Mhm,
I don't know what the next what the next one could be. I gotta just sit back. I think. I mean, I'm always writing, and
mhm.
now I'm writing some fiction, and maybe that's the answer. But um, yeah, I feel like I poured my life into this one, and it's a little daunting to think about a sequel.
Okay, okay. So I have to hear about Crosby.
Yeah, yeah,
Share with our listeners
Crosby.
about Crosby.
Well, yeah, as I said, there's a chapter called Companions, and a reason I called it Companions is twofold. One is because I've had these 3 yellow labs, and they've each been with me for about a decade, and they've each kind of walked with me as my closest companion through a different chapter of my adult life. The first one, Beaumont, was with me in that first marriage and literally walked out of that house with me. I had not a duffel bag with clothes. I had the clothes on my back and my 10-year-old dog following me out the house. And then I had Albert, who I couldn't even afford a dog, and Courtney, whom I started dating the woman I'm now married to after we each had gotten divorced, and she lived in Dallas, and we dated long distance for several years, and I was broke, and I got foreclosed on, and she mailed me a check for $425 so I could go buy a dog.
Mm,
And I mean, that's love,
that
man.
is love.
That is love, and someone buys you a dog. And then Albert was kinda with me for 10 years while I was rebuilding my life, starting over from scratch, no house, no money, nothing, no marriage, I mean, didn't barely see my kids, and by the end of that 10 years, I had full custody of my kids. I I was living in this house. I'm married to the woman of my dreams. So Albert kind of walked with me through that. And now Crosby, he's with me now. He's my yellow lab. He's going to turn 6 on May 1st. Um, yeah, he's a great hunter. Um, and an even better companion. That dog absolutely worships and adores me. And so we've had some great adventures. We've been all over the country to hunt. But he's also content to just sleep at my feet while I'm writing.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
love that, and there's a lot of envy. Let me just share that with
Yeah.
you. I'm after this episode, I'm gonna need to go to my friend Holly and say, "I need a picture of Sammy." Sammy's as I joke, my four-legged nephew,
Oh,
and
nice.
when he would house sit while his mom was doing her thing, for her business, just sit right next to me. He did not want you to interact with him at all, but he wanted to be, like, right next to you, which
Yeah,
I
well,
got.
I said there's 2 parts of that chapter called companions, and the other part is that there is the interspecies connection between Homo sapiens and canines is unknown on
Yeah.
this planet, except for that. Those are the only 2 species we are with the dogs who have that kind of a connection. And that's special, man. And that evolved over tens of thousands of years as we domesticated wolves, and they became our companions from another species, initially to hunt and to protect us, but now to kind of like give us spiritual life, inner life too.
I think before I leave this earth, I would love to have a dog again. I
Oh,
really
you got
would.
to, man. Come on, do
I'm
it.
telling you. So, do you have any sense of what will be next for you? We already talked about the book, and totally, I
Yeah,
get it. I've done it. That's good. I'm good.
yeah.
What's going to be your next adventure with you and Crosby?
Mm. Well, that's a good question. As I told you before, I've invited a couple guys I know a little bit to come to the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers National Rendezvous here in Minneapolis, and then join me at the cabin for a few days of turkey hunting. And of course, Crosby will be part of that. Um, I'm hopeful. Well, okay, I'll tell you a big adventure that I'm afraid Crosby can't come on. But
Okay.
there's a little part in the book about a Welsh ancestor of mine, who my great great grandfather, who was a Welsh Presbyterian minister in southern Minnesota. And I've never been to Wales,
Mm.
but I want to go to Wales. But I'm not just going to go to Wales in January. I'm going to go and hunt in Wales. So I've gotten in touch with a guy who duck hunts on the coast of Wales over sea ducks, and it's way too much to bring a dog. There's too that traveling internationally with a dog is not a good thing to do. So
No.
Crosby, unfortunately, will have to stay at home, but um, that will be a big adventure because I hope to duck hunt in Wales. I hope to goose hunt at the north of Scotland on the Orkney Islands, and then hopefully uh, hunt a stag in the UK or in Scotland or England, probably Scotland. But then I know a guy who owns a Italian restaurant in London, and he said, "You just drive right up to the front of my restaurant with that stag, and we'll bring him right in through the front door. You sit down with a bottle of wine, and I'll start serving you venison."
I love
So
it.
that's it. Big adventure. I mean, I got a lot of little adventures between now and then, but that's the big one I'm looking forward to.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I have a lot of hope for that adventure for you. I think it'd
Thanks.
be a lot of
Thanks.
fun. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Tony, it's been a great pleasure to have you on the podcast. And before we head out, you're a podcaster as well, the Reverend Hunter podcast.
Yeah.
And tell us about it.
Yeah, on the Reverend Hunter podcast, I have conversations with people who find meaning in the outdoors. I mean, a lot of them are hunters and anglers, but other people are just people who love the outdoors and don't hunt and fish, but they find meaning and transcendence in outdoors pursuits. So I have conversations about that with people. It comes out every other Monday. Yeah, and I want to, like you, it's a little side hustle that
Yeah.
I love doing.
Fantastic. So, if our listeners would like to learn more about your work and your book, The God of Wild Places, your side hustle, podcasting, where's the
Yeah.
best place for us to send them?
The easiest thing to do is just type godofwildplaces.com into your browser, godofwildplaces.com. That will take you to a page on my website that's dedicated to the book. But from there, not only can you order the book and learn more about it, you can get onto my main website. From there, you can see YouTube videos and the podcast and articles I've written and find all my social media. I'm on all the platforms, of course, and except TikTok. Not on TikTok. Not going there, Howard. Not doing it.
I started TikTok, but I was like, I just don't get TikTok.
Sorry, I'll let the that's you younger kids can have that. But
So,
yeah, so on all the socials, but yeah, just godofwildplaces.com. I'd love to have anybody who listen come in and check out my site. Yeah.
sounds like a plan. Well, we will definitely provide the link to the godofwildplaces.com, and then they can go on their own virtual journey and learn more about you and your work. Tony, it's been a
Thanks.
pleasure to have you on the podcast. I'm so glad we have reconnected since, say, Vermont, Casper, and
Yeah.
David had, our good friend David McElvaney had suggested, hey, you got to have our
Yeah.
friend
That
Tony
was nice.
on. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, listen, stay in the line. We're going to do a real quick close, and you and I can have a final chat. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Tony Jones, outdoorsman, theologian. We'll see where that goes after the book is published, which is going to be coming out this April. The God of Wild Places. He's a prolific writer. He's a podcaster. He has the Reverend Hunter podcast. What a great conversation! And as a coach, I love the journey, and I love we're all on journeys, and we're on them for specific reasons, and we sometimes we know our destinations, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we pick up those aha moments and insights along the way, and that's kind of what I took out of today's episode is the journey that Tony has been on. And also, looking at a little envy, he gets to be on this journey not only with his family, but also his special friend Crosby. And I am going to kind of twist Tony's arm to get a whole bunch of photos so we can share those on our website, which you'll be able to find this episode on the outdooradventureseries.com website. We're also on our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. Wherever you listen to your podcast, any one of those directories, Apple, Google, Spotify, etc. And we will also have the episode up on YouTube as well. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. And we look forward to having you join us for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care.